This is Jason Rona, and this is one of my favorite RC products of all time. The Traxxas SRT stadium truck was released in 1994, but what was interesting about this story with Traxxas is a lot of people don't know today is that they were highly involved in competitive off-road racing then. From about 1990 to about 1994, they were highly involved in competitive racing, which most people today wouldn't have really picked up on unless it was, if you do a little bit of research online. I've done a little bit of my own here, but I was lucky enough to be racing in those days. It was kind of the good old days of RC racing. But what kind of got the ball rolling for Traxxas, and we'll get to this truck in a minute, but what kind of got the ball rolling for them was in 1990, a racer by the name of Tom Owens won a NORCA national title in Dallas, Texas with the original Traxxas Eagle stadium truck. And what was big about that was at the time, Losi and Team Losi was so dominant in that class. Even at this particular event, Jack Johnson, Kyle Reed, a lot of the top Losi drivers were in attendance, and this Tom won with the Traxxas, which, Car Action was so nice, of a report on these type of articles back then. But it was neat to see. You go back and you look at this and the way it was written, and Traxxas was on the scene. And Traxxas had started many years before that with some RTR vehicles, but in this racing market, they were just kind of getting going. Associated and Team Losi were so dominant. There was also, of course, Kyosho, Tamiya, Schumacher at the time. But then the next step came at the 1991 Worlds, which was in Detroit, Michigan. And that race always gets a lot of publicity for Masami winning with the Team Associated Stealth car, which has never been released. But that was the buzz at that particular event, was there was this Team Associated Stealth car. Well, another vehicle that was also in attendance and being raced was the Traxxas TRX-1, which was here. Good thing we got all this information, but the TRX-1 was the buggy version. And this qualified fourth in the Worlds with Scott Montgomery driving in Detroit there on the bumpy track conditions. So this buggy and Traxxas was really kind of making a surge. 1990, you can see 1991, and at that race, of course, Masami got the TQ and win with the Associated car, and Rick Velo got second, also driving the same Associated car. Interestingly enough, the very next year, Rick Velo was racing for Traxxas. So he went from second in the world with the Team Associated stuff to racing for the Traxxas team. So they were making a huge push here. They had the stadium truck, they had the buggy, the TRX-1, and as they were moving along, they were getting the team a little bit larger. They're making a push, and the vehicles were becoming better each time. They kind of got a little bit of a... they were known, I guess, initially for the white plastics that looked a little similar to the Associated stuff, but as time went on, it started to change a little bit. But if we get into 1992 is where things really kind of started happening. There was a Roar Nationals. Back then I happened to be at the race, which is also in Dallas, Texas. They had Rick Velo racing in the stock class, which, today people get a hard time for racing in stock. And you can take it back to 1992. They put Rick Velo in the stock class, and he TQ'd and won, winning a Roar National title with the Traxxas vehicle. Now, as racers, we looked at these cars in the pits, of course, and he would kind of outfit this thing with whatever it took to win. At that time, there was times they'd put a stealth transmission in it. There was times they'd put, the cool RCPS body to make the car look a little bit better. But the bottom line is he was out there winning races, and if you look back, he actually qualified third in the modified class. I think he ended up finishing about, down 7th or 8th, but Rick was really making this car top, and Traxxas kept making that push, kind of moving down the line. So in 1992, he was kind of getting hot. Rick was running this Traxxas stuff. We got to the Roar Truck Nationals. I happened to be at that as well, which was in Savannah, Georgia, And back then, if there was weather or rain, we'd race at night. They'd turn the lights on. We ran a blistering qualifiers there at night. And I remember Rick put in an amazing TQ run and TQ'd the modified truck class with the Traxxas. So at that point, they were on this Blue Eagle LS. And I was talking to one of his teammates, which was little John Walters, and he said this was the truck that they had so much success with in those days. And you can see here we had a nice little ad here that I was able to pull up from '92. This was something they ran in car action also, which was the Blue Eagle LS. Won a Norca Dirt Oval Championship, and then they kind of refer here to Rick winning the stock national title with the buggy. Of course, you can see here it had this this body on the car, which made the car very recognizable, and people used to give him a hard time about this body. I know we had a lot of guys racing it locally, Tracy Proctor, Jeff Lynn, a lot of guys. We had Don and Jane McMillan who raced here in Florida. They always ran the Traxxas cars, and I remember seeing them all the time, and this body was really recognizable, and the joke was kind of that it looked like the backside of a shovel that was the styling, but it worked at those days. It was a nice competitive car, and they were moving along. So we're 92. The car, stuff was really moving. It was working well. You can see they had a Norca Nationals here in 92 where Rick Velo got third in factory mod truck. You can see Jeremy Courts and Brian Kinwall were first and second, Rick Velo third, and then you can see a lot of other drivers starting to pop in, like little John Walters. He was starting to run really well with Traxxas. There was Gary Guest. So they had 3 or 4 really top drivers that were really starting to make a name for themselves and running well with the Traxxas product. And then we got into the 1993 season, and I think this is where things kind of either peaked out or stalled out. And that was the race. I happened to be at the Winter Championships. I believe I was in the same, class, and little John Walters took that Traxxas LS2 and he TQ'd the modified truck class. And I remember because I was second overall. We both had great qualifiers when the track was super wet at night, and we both put the trucks first and second. And this was kind of the part where Traxxas was really making waves, and people were starting to think that maybe the truck was working better than the other ones currently on the market. Associate had the RC10T, Losi had the LXT, and they were very competitive. Things were moving along. The guys were getting the Traxxas stuff working, and everybody started looking at these things like, hey, maybe these guys are really for real out here. They're putting money into the teams, the development of the cars, and everyone was starting to see them more and more as a threat. You started to see a lot of those vehicles locally, and it was starting to make a difference. And you move along through 93, they had the Roar Nationals, which was out in California. I happened to be at that as well. And you can see here again, we had a loaded stock class, which we talked about earlier. People give drivers some criticism for running stock these days, but if you look down the results, Jeremy Courts, Mike Weed, Rick Velo, Barry Baker, Frosty St. Clair, Little John Walters, Mike Fletcher, Jim Jacobson, Jose Escamilla, and Curtis Stock. That was the A main, and I'd say 5 of these drivers were maybe 5 or 6 were very good modified drivers. But Rick Velo here again with the Traxxas, he was right in there in the 93 race, and then things kind of went a little south. I think Traxxas backed off on the race program. I'm sure they saw the money they're putting into it. They had these dreams of maybe a different direction with the full RTR type cars, and they kind of reinvented themselves again. But they made one more run at it in 94, 95, and they released this truck here, which we brought out. This is the SRT, as we talked about earlier, and I think this was probably the best looking stadium truck they made. It had kind of a really unique wheel on it with this really dish shape, and I thought you could tell right away when somebody was racing or qualifying with this truck. You knew what it was because of the wheels. It had a nice looking body for the time period and a double decker chassis. This one here is fiberglass. They went to some black colored parts, which was starting to become more common on some Team Driver associated cars, some Team Driver Traxxas vehicles. Of course, Low CLs had the black colored plastic. But this truck, I think, was sort of a combination of everything that they had learned in racing. And I remember seeing this come out, and I really enjoyed seeing this truck. I thought it was really good at the time, because the competition was the RC10T, the LXT, and I think this truck fit right in with it. And it was just as competitive as the others, had a lot of success on different surfaces, and they used some things that they had learned along the way with the racers like Rick Velo, Little John Walters, Gary Guest. They incorporated it into this truck. They styled the body so it was attractive on the race scene, and of course they had some of their own styling cues that they used along the way that I thought still made it stand out and look like a Traxxas. But we wanted to bring that out here today because it's definitely one of my favorite vehicles. Didn't exactly get the run after about 94, 95 when they decided to go more into the RTR market. Of course, we know they kind of reinvented RC with RTR vehicles. The T-Maxx was the amazing success that it was, and of course the Slash today. So all those vehicles have kind of spawned new vehicles and new classes for them. Monster trucks for them have been great over the years. T-Maxx, Revo, E-Revo, they've all been really successful, not to mention the platform of the Slash. And if you actually look at a lot of these cars they have today, the Rustler, the Stampede, and all these type of vehicles, the parts are actually still come from a lot of these vehicles from the 90s which they raced, like the Eagle and like the SRT here. And they've been reusing and repurposing these parts over the years to use throughout their lineup. Sure, they've refined them, made them different to work for the newer purposes, but a lot of these ideas and a lot of the functionality of this truck really spawned a lot of their products going forward. And if you really look these things over, there's a lot of things that carry over even to today. So we really appreciate you joining us. Again, one of the favorite products of all time, the Traxxas SRT, but really it's more about a favorite time period and seeing Traxxas in competitive off-road racing. And thanks for joining us. Remember, if you like this, subscribe to us here on YouTube and ring that bell to make sure you get notified when a new video comes live. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.